So again, I wanted to welcome everyone to our Interactive Rubrics, providing consistent and quality feedback in Blackboard courses. My name is Jeff Geronimo, and I am the e-learning design coordinator with the Faculty Development and Instructional Design Center here at Northern Illinois University. So if you don't know me, I do train quite a bit here within the department. My particular areas of expertise is within the areas of online teaching, technology integration, and as well as Blackboard use. So if you're thinking about trying something new in teaching and technology, or just have any particular questions regarding pedagogical uses with technology, please just feel free to contact myself or anyone within the Faculty Development and Instructional Design Center. And we have our contact information there, and I'll be able to post that as well towards the end of the session. So again, thanks for joining us, and today is really, hopefully you're all here to learn a little bit more about the actual Interactive Rubric tool. We've had some other workshops in the past that really dealt with more of the pedagogical standpoint behind rubrics, but today we'll be covering the actual Rubrics tool, the Interactive Rubrics tool within Blackboard. So some of my objectives for us today really are just a few key things. We're really going to go ahead and explore, what it is that this tool does, and take a look at some of the sample interactive rubrics. And then basically looking at some of those steps that we can take to create an actual rubric within Blackboard and applying it to an assignment for grading. And don't worry if that confuses you. I mean, most of us here are wondering really, well, what does this have to do with Blackboard? So hopefully your questions will be answered just along the way. And after that, we're going to demonstrate, I'm going to do a short application sharing session to show exactly how we're going to use this rubric within the Blackboard course, as well as to share with others, which is not always so common, but we'll talk about how you do have that particular option. So today's really is going to be an overview over that. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to just post it in the chat area. Again, generally that's the most popular way. Otherwise, feel free to raise your hand as well. So let's take a look real quick now at talking about a little bit more of the background with the rubrics, and then moving into more of the integration with Blackboard. So when we're talking about the rubric, we're actually referring to the tool that lists the evaluation criteria for an assignment. And most of us are fairly familiar with rubrics, but I kind of, for the sake of review, just to go over this real quick. Rubrics can help students organize their efforts to meet the requirements of an assignment. It really helps make it a little bit more transparent, and you'll notice later on here that the Rubrics tool really allows the transparency to be more evident both on the instructor side as well as on the student side, so that students also know exactly what's required of them before and or after they complete an assignment. And faculty can use rubrics to explain their evaluations to students. So, and this is a very important note that I wanted to point out, since our campus really is striving to be a little bit more green when it comes to grading. And now that many faculty and staff are really having students to submit their work electronically through Blackboard, they want to find a more seamless way and a much more efficient way of grading those assignments. Most of us are familiar with just simply going through those assignments, downloading them, whether it's a Microsoft Word document, which is mostly popular, and then putting in your comments as track changes and annotations. So this rubric tool is really going to be able to provide another alternative way of doing that. So if you remember, and if that's your particular strategy, you download Microsoft Word files and provide annotations on the side. And if you can think about actually doing that for 20+ students, it takes a long time. So this tool will hopefully help simplify that process. And looking forward within Blackboard, as you've noted here too, rubrics are made up of rows and columns, so you'll take a look and see how that works. The rows do correspond to various criteria of an assignment, so you might have something set up according to maybe quality of the post. If you're working with discussion posts, you might have a math assignment, so maybe talking about the quality of that assignment, maybe a particular length of a writing assignment. The columns correspond to the level of the achievement expressed for each criterion. So if you've seen many rubrics out there before, you'll know that there's many different levels of achievement. You might have a couple different kinds. The description point value for each cell in the rubric defines the evaluation and score of an assignment. So within this particular tool, you'll see that you do have those options, plus many more as well. So you can take what you already know about rubrics or not, and really refine that further when we're looking at the Interactive Rubric tool. So here's an example of the rubric, and this is the actual created rubric within Blackboard using the Interactive Rubrics tool. You can tell and see within the particular screenshot here that you do have the different rows and the columns, so you have the different criteria. So you have, for instance, in this screenshot, and for those of you that may not be able to see this real well, just make sure that that your screen for this Blackboard Collaborate interface is maximized so that you can see this. So I apologize if some of you aren't able to really zoom into this, but you'll see here in this particular sample rubric, for this row is the different criterion for the assignment. So we have reasoning and analysis, we have a focus on topic, accuracy of facts and citations, and so on and so forth. And of course, the different rows in the columns are obviously going to be customizable based on your subject area, what it is that you're grading. This particular one happens to be for a writing assignment, which is why we have the MLA criterion and mechanics and organization. And you'll notice as well, as you've already can see here, you have the columns that correspond to the level of achievement. So for this particular one, there's only 3. We have below expectations, proficient, exemplary. Obviously, you can change that, as we'll see along the way. You might do something along the lines of satisfactory, not satisfactory. These are, by default, Blackboard does provide you with some samples of these levels of achievement as well as the criteria. And you'll also see in the sample rubric that you have the point values, again, which is customizable, as well as adding the actual description for each of these criteria. And so looking at this tool, really, again, going back to kind of the introduction with the rubrics, and why are we, trying to advocate the use of rubrics? Well, particularly in terms of Blackboard within the electronic grading environment, whether you're teaching face-to-face, blended, or fully online courses, especially online courses, you really, again, I've noted even here at the very end of my bullet points, time savings, which I'll get to, but other than the fact that we know that rubrics really can help save time, it really does provide consistent evaluation of student work. So you're always being able to use the same particular rubric for every single student in your course, and it allows you to provide more of that objective grading strategy rather than looking at a paper and saying, oh, this is a 50, oh, this other paper is a 48. Which brings me to my next point, really being able to provide that clarification for why a student received a particular score. So it's nice to be able to use a rubric. If you remember in the previous screen, just that screenshot of that rubric, you're able to really point and click through which of the criterion you want to assign to the student based on the quality of their work. And of course, trying to really tie the evaluation criteria to course program objectives. And in my own courses that I've taught as well, even the course I teach right now, I always strive to have a rubric in place for most of my graded activities. And since I teach a fully online course, a lot of my students are participating in discussion boards as well as submitting assignments. And those, as we'll see later, can be rubrics can be attached to those assignments. And again, really heightens and enhances the transparency of grading for both the instructor, myself, and for my students. And as I've mentioned here, it really does save time, as we'll see. When we go through the screenshots and take a look through the demonstration, start thinking a little bit more about how you might actually customize and tailor this for your own particular courses, because I recognize that obviously not many of us might be teaching a fully online course, but for most of us who do use the assignments feature within Blackboard to allow students to submit their work, this is really just a nice added feature of being able to then take those submissions and grade them in a manner that's a lot more convenient than using Microsoft Word track changes. So again, within Blackboard now, kind of shifting gears here a little bit, as I mentioned with the rubric tool, you can actually associate these not so much with just assignment submissions, but you can also associate them with short answer test questions. So as most of us might know, if you create a Blackboard test or quiz, anything with multiple choice questions or have objective right or wrong answers can be automatically be graded. But if you put in some essay or short answer test questions, those questions can be associated with a particular rubric, especially if you have more than one question. You can also apply these particular rubrics to blogs, journals, wikis, and more popular, the discussion board threads and forums. So I know some faculty who started using them for the assignments feature, but didn't realize that you can also use these for discussion board threads as well, which is very nice, because if for most of us who might be advocating for the use of discussion boards, you might include that as part of your participation grade. So actually using a discussion rubric or creating a rubric that focuses on the quality of discussion board is a great way to be able to do that. So again, just to keep that in mind, that it's not just for assignments or for electronic assignments, but for pretty much any graded activity within the Blackboard environment. And so here's a quick screenshot, and of course, and you'll notice too that later on we'll go into the application sharing, but since application sharing can get a little jarring for many of us due to the bandwidth and wireless and wired connections, I try to put as many screenshots as I can. So this is just a quick overview of the page that you will generally see. Obviously, it might vary depending on the theme that you're using in your course, but in terms of the actual Rubrics tool, you'll notice that wherever you are in your course, within the course management panel, underneath the course tools area, which you'll need to expand by clicking on that down arrow, you'll see a link to the rubrics. This is the same area where you'll see the other tools like your announcements, if you're using Turning Point, clicker systems, or any of the other tools, you'll find the rubrics link there as well. And clicking on that, you'll be presented with a display here with an option to see any available rubrics, and probably by default you will not see anything here in this particular area because you may not have already had rubrics. But you will definitely see the option to create a rubric or to import a rubric. So you'll notice as we go along here, and I'll have some links to show, that not only can you create rubrics, you can also share these rubrics with other members of your department or perhaps with your teaching assistants. And it's a really great way to be able to share those with other members of the staff. So if for some reason you create or you find a really good rubric and you adapt it to your assignment, you obviously might want to have a need to share that with other folks. So what Blackboard allows you to do is take that created rubric, export it as a special zip file. This is something that I wanted to point out. It's a zip file that you can't actually open on your computer, but it is something that Blackboard will recognize. So this is something where once you create it within Blackboard, it can only be exported and imported into Blackboard. This is not something that you will be able to edit offline on your computer. But it's just a great way to be able to package any kind of rubric that you might have created. You'll also notice that I'll show links and send links out as well to special areas that Blackboard actually has provided for faculty. And there are some downloadable rubrics that are already there, and you can feel free to import them into your own course, and I'll show those along the way as well. So you can see here that we have quite a number of rubrics that were created or already imported. You'll be able to see a description of that rubric or provide your own, as well as an actual name. So you might actually have a rubric just for discussion boards specifically, and you might have a rubric specifically for writing assignments. I find that from experience, you'll generally have 2 or 3 rubrics unless perhaps you have 5 or 6 different assignments, very unique assignments which require unique rubrics, so you'll probably have a rubric for each of those. I've taught English for the past 5 years, so usually when I've had a rubric for each particular essay, I would have a very unique rubric, perhaps one based on an expository prose, perhaps one on a research paper. So you can have as many different rubrics as you want, but generally, depending on the design of your own course, you might create one for, particularly starting out with just for your assignments. You can start out creating just a general assignments rubric and then possibly refining that and adding more along the way. So this is generally, again, just as an overview. You'll find this within your course wherever you have instructor privileges underneath your course management panel under course tools, and you'll see the link to rubrics. Okay. So it's still pretty quiet, which is good. So hopefully everyone here is following along and can, if anybody has any questions, again, just feel free to post them in the chat area. So moving on, now that we've kind of taken a look at where the rubrics are housed, it might be more helpful also to show an example of this rubric in action. And again, I apologize for the quality of the screenshot, but this is just a quick example showing a particular rubric that was applied to a discussion forum. Because remember, again, you can apply rubrics to discussion forums. So we have one here applied to this student, and for those of you that do use discussion boards in your courses, whether online or face-to-face, you'll probably know that you can grade discussion forums and threads using point values and using comments, but this is an example of what it might look like if you actually associated a rubric. You'll see here on the bottom right-hand corner that in addition to providing a grade for the discussion forum, you can also see the different criterion and the levels of achievement for that particular rubric that was associated with this discussion board. So you will not obviously see these options unless you've actually taken a created rubric and associated with that assignment. So when I use that word associate, that is Blackboard's term for saying, well, basically taking a rubric that you created and applying it to an assignment that you want to use it with. So this particular rubric is for a discussion forum. It will look somewhat similar, somewhat different depending on the assignment that you have. So you'll see here in this particular screenshot, this is a discussion post from a student, and from an instructor standpoint, I'm going in to grade this assignment, or grading this discussion board using the actual rubric that was applied. And moving on, so again, I mentioned before that we do have some sample rubrics, and these sample rubrics were provided by Blackboard, but it was a collection of rubrics that were created by other faculty and instructors across the U.S., and they were able to share their rubrics that they created within Blackboard. So they are available as you recognize zip file that you'll find. And this link that you're seeing here is provided below, which is www.niu.edu/Blackboard/assess-rubrics. And you can find this is within our Teaching with Blackboard site. If you go within there and go to assessments, and you'll be able to find our actual rubrics page. And so this is a great area where you can actually go in to see all the tutorials that we've had. I've actually recorded an interactive tutorial rubric demo that you can use, and it kind of really goes straight to the point into showing you how to actually do this. So you'll see tutorials for that as well as the link to the area where you can download those rubrics that I mentioned as well. We also have a previous recording made by our assistant director here at the Faculty Development Instructional Design Center. So he did deliver this earlier this year. In case you needed to view this, again, you can view that tutorial. Otherwise, again, I am recording today's session, so I will have this posted up there within the coming week in case you need to come back here and refer to that as well. But you will also see quick guides that reference the same material that I'm covering today. So again, feel free to to jot down this URL here, just as a reminder. When you do go into our Blackboard Teaching with Blackboard site, you will see not only these tutorials but other tutorials as well. So this is just something that I would like to point out there, that they are available and for you to avail at any time. I'm going ahead here to push out the URL in case you aren't able to get that link right away. So I did post the link to this rubrics page here in the chat area, so feel free to use that and bookmark it. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go into the actual demonstration portion of today's session. And of course, this is an hour-long workshop, but again, I know that many of us are pressed for time. We want to get the information right when we need it. And so I'm also going to be able to provide some time in case you do have any questions near the end, questions that I can address either through the chat area, or if you do have a microphone, that's something that I can also do as well. So within the demonstration, what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple things here, really taking a look at how do we actually create the rubric, walking through those steps, and then taking that rubric and adding it to an assessment, any kind of assessment, whether it's an assignment or for a discussion board. For the sake of time, I'm probably just going to demonstrate it using just an assignment. and then being able to look at how to grade using the actual rubric that you've created, as well as taking that rubric for use in a different course. This is something that you may not always do, but it's always good to know how to do it, just in case you decide to teach this course again later, or if there's another instructor in an upcoming semester that might be interested in using that. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to start application sharing here in just a second. So what I'm going to do now is, if you just bear with me for just a few moments, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And momentarily you should see a in progress indicator, which will go ahead and start sharing the screen. So you may not see this right away. And during the application sharing, you'll note too that I may not be able to see the chat bar as visibly as I can. So in case something happens, just feel free to raise my hand so I can get that. So hopefully you should be seeing the, I'm here in a Blackboard course. Can I go ahead and just get a quick poll just to make sure that everyone here can indeed see this Blackboard course? If I can just have everyone go back to the same polling area. All you need to do is click on the checkbox and click yes. If you don't see it, let me go ahead. Some of you are able to see it. Okay. So, all right, so we have an overwhelming response here. Let me try this. It should load in just a few moments. Okay, so some of you, yes, it should be loading. We started out with a lot of no's, and then now everyone's changing their answers to yes. It does take a while. One of the interesting things about web conferencing software is that they'll always lag at some point. So you may have that small momentary lag. If you really can't see it at all, what I would probably recommend that you do, which tends to work for a lot of us, is to go ahead and try actually resizing your screen. So that's something that usually might work as well in case that you are having issues with doing this. So that's just something that I wanted to point out here. I'm going ahead to expand my window. So if you'd like, what you can try to do too is you can also expand your window just in case you can't see this. If something's troubling you, let me know, and I can go ahead and try to resolve the problem. I want to make sure that everyone here is able to see the screen. So I'm here in the within Blackboard, and this is just a sample course. So your layout in your own course might look a little bit different. Just feel free to adapt this to your own course as well, based on where things might be located. But again, within your course, you'll first want to make sure that edit mode is on the upper right-hand corner, just since we're working within our course and we want to make some changes. So within your course, after edit mode is on, if you'll navigate to your course menu on the left-hand side, again, under course management area, you'll see the course tools. And within the course tools, we'll go ahead and find and click on the Rubrics tool. And within a few seconds here, you should see the rubrics page pop up. And like I said, since I've already imported some previously used rubrics, you'll already see them populated here within the screen. There's 5 rubrics. Some of these were sample rubrics. And again, as I've noted, that you can see this real quick, that I have a grading rubric for blogs. I have them for discussion boards. And what I'll do too, just so that we can make sure everyone can see this, I'm going to just zoom in here. Hopefully this might help for those that might not be able to see this as well. There is a rubric for blogs. I have one for discussion boards, specific threads. There is a rubric for writing assignments. So you'll notice that once you've created one, you'll have a particular rubric here that you can associate to any graded activity. So it's a really nice way of doing that. So one of the first things that I said I was going to do is to just demonstrate real quick how to actually create that rubric. So this is something that we're going to go ahead and focus on now. So once you're inside the rubrics page, you will note that there, again, as I mentioned before in the presentation, that you have the option to create a rubric as well as to import a rubric. So to create one, we're going to go ahead and click on the Create Rubric button. And the screen that you'll see is very familiar to when you add other items in Blackboard, such as assignments. You'll always be presented with the settings page to input some information about that particular item. So here in the, since we're adding a rubric, I'm going to go ahead and provide a name, which is required. So I'll just say this is a sample rubric. And again, it doesn't matter what this could be for anything. I'm just showing you some general examples of how you might do this. And the description, I'll just say this is a sample rubric. And you can put anything here you want. Within the rubric detail, this is the second section, and again, I apologize if the screen tends to lag a little bit here. Just give your machine just a few moments to compensate for that. But now that you've already entered a name and a description for your rubric, it's time to actually go in to tweak and customize the different rows and columns here within your rubric. If you use your own rubric now, this is probably a great way to be able to migrate your paper copies of your rubrics into more of a interactive style. So a lot of us, I know that I've used to use rubrics that I created in Microsoft Word, and then I published them out as a PDF file. But I was never really able to use that rubric or really show students what was on that rubric unless I went towards those extra steps to attach the rubric, make those changes, show them to the student. It was just always a lot of extra clicks and a lot of extra work. So if you have an existing rubric, this is a great way to be able to just kind of copy and paste the different levels of criterion and levels of achievement for that rubric. So like again, by default, you will see that you've already have the different levels of achievement here up on the top, as well as the different criteria. The nice thing about doing this is you'll notice too within the rubric type, you can set it so you can have the rubric as like probably no points if you're not really using this as a graded activity. You can use it as a points value, which is the rubric I usually use more often. But some of you might also have other rubrics where you probably only have 1 or 2 levels of achievement, and you typically have just the rubric out of 100 points. So this is a great way to be able to use the points range option. So rather than trying to create a level of achievement for every single criteria, you can just simply put a point value from 0 to 100. But of course, to make the grading a little bit more objective and a little bit more transparent, I typically do start out with just the regular points. So I can, again, go in here. I already have a couple of different achievements set up. I have a novice, competent, and proficient. The criteria that was added by default was my formatting, organization, and grammar. So I can go here and say, well, maybe I'll make for my extremely proficient, I can do this as 10 points. My competent, I could say, just again, since I'm bad at math, I'll just say 5. My points here for novice is 0. I could repeat the same process for all the different areas of the rubric. So I'm just going to do this real quick. And like I said, you can enter in the description for each, which is if you already have an electronic version of your own hard copy rubric, this would be a great time to copy and paste those within these cells here. So I could say within my proficient, student is proficient with formatting, etc. And you can go ahead and add that as well. You'll also notice too, what's very nice about this is once you've added the different point values, if I scroll down here real quick, Blackboard will automatically provide a summation of the total number of points. So it's a great way just to make sure that you are providing the right point value for your students. This 30 obviously does reflect the fact that I have 3 different criterion, each which holds a maximum value of 10 points for a total of 30 points. I can also do other things such as I can add another row if I would like. And within a few moments there you should see another row get added to the very bottom. I could also add another column by clicking the corresponding button. And if I didn't want a particular column or row, I could click on the down arrows that appear here. So for instance, in this new column that I just added here on the far right hand corner, I can click on that down arrow and I can click on delete this column. I could click on edit if I wanted to edit the actual name, but since I don't actually want to do that, I wanted to go ahead and delete it. And my screen here is a little too big, so I'm going to unzoom this. So I'm going to hit cancel. So I can do that. Let's say I can go to my novice column, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So it's already been deleted. I can delete my other column as well, but I'm not going to do that. So there's a lot of different opportunities that you can do within this particular page. This is really the time to be creative, really the time to be able to go in and tweak how you want to do this. So for instance, if I didn't like on my criterion, I didn't like organization, I could click on that down arrow and click on edit. I could change organization to something more along the lines of structure, possibly. And then I could just hit save. Maybe I wanted to change the grammar criterion to something like grammar and mechanics. I can do that. Grammar and mechanics. Click save. Again, this new row I added, I don't really want that. I'm just going to delete this row. So again, I'll probably delete my new column I also created, delete this column. It's very, very intuitive. It's really a lot of just different clicking around to see what works for you. So right now I only have 2 levels of achievement, and I have 3 criteria in this particular rubric. Obviously not a very good rubric, but just a rubric nevertheless, just to show and demonstrate exactly how you might create it. Depending on what you're doing, if you're experimenting for the first time, it may take you quite a while. But again, I do recommend that if you do already have an existing PDF or Word document of your rubric, this is really a great time, again, just to copy and paste the different levels of achievement and criteria over, as well as their corresponding descriptions. So after you've done that, you can then just look over your work again, just to reiterate, beyond adding rows and columns and editing and deleting them, you can take a look at the rubric types. So for this particular rubric, I did mention that this is a points type of a rubric, just so that I can be able to provide several levels of achievement. For those of you that want to do only 1 or 2 levels of achievement with a point range that you can simply enter rather than pointing and clicking later, and I'll mention what I mean by that later, you can do a points range. But just for the sake of this particular example, I'm going to keep it to points, since I do want to assign a particular objective point value to each of these levels of achievement. So then scrolling down, I'm going to go ahead and click on Submit, and this is going into, and you'll notice that I go back to my rubrics page where I originally was, and down at the very bottom I have the sample rubric that I've already created. And if you want to, for instance, take a quick look at what it might look like and other options that are available to you in this page, you'll notice too that beyond just seeing the name of the rubric and its corresponding description, if you hover over the name, it is not hyperlinked, but you will see a down arrow that appears similar to other items here in Blackboard. This is your action link. So I can click on the action link to my sample rubric, and I can go and click on that down arrow to see what options might actually be available. And for this particular rubric, I can even delete them. I can also export them as well. But for right now, since I have 4 particular rubric, or 5 plus my 6th one, I'm just going to go ahead and leave them as they are for right now. So this is really just the general process for creating the actual rubric itself. And now, due to the actual collaborate interface here, you may not be able to see all the different features due to the limitations of the window, but I'm just going to go ahead and show this just to make sure that we can all see this. All right, just 1 moment. Your screen may give a few seconds again to compensate, since we are still in the app sharing mode. So again, I apologize for any of the jitters that you might be seeing. So now that we've already created the rubric, then the next step is really taking a look at actually adding this rubric to an existing assessment. So as I mentioned before, now that you have a rubric, you need to make sure that it's actually physically attached to an assignment for this grading process to work. So to do this, all I would need to do then is to go to an area of my course where my assessments are located. So for this particular course, I put all my assessments, all my graded activities up here in the assessments area within my Blackboard course. So if you notice in my course menu, I'm going to go to my assessments area. And within my assessments area, I have a lot of different activities. But what I want to do is I'm going to go and scroll down real quick here. And I do have a sample assessment that is at the very bottom of this course. And this is simply just an assignment submission link. I didn't set anything fancy. This is just a link where students can upload their Microsoft Word files or any particular submission. This is just a regular assignment. So what I'm going to do then is hover over that assignment, making sure that edit mode is on. And once the action link appears, I'm going to click on that, that down arrow. And you'll notice too that with this, I can then click on the Edit. Once the contextual menu appears, I can click on Edit. And bear with me too. Again, this may take a few seconds here. So now what we're really doing is when we go in to edit an assignment, we physically need to go in and edit the actual assignment as if we were going to edit the name or the instructions, primarily because this is also where we can actually attach the assignment rubric. So if you scroll down, we're going to go towards the grading section, which is section 3 here on this page. And generally, if you are familiar with using electronic assignment submissions here in Blackboard, you'll notice that in addition to adding the name and description, you can add the points possible. By default, I just put 100, but now that you'll notice I have an associated rubrics area. And so for those of you that have created assignments before and you might have been wondering what this associated rubrics is, this is the actual area where you're going to add the actual rubric that we just created. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'll hover over the Add Rubric button, and you'll notice then as I click on that, I have the option to select a rubric, create a new rubric, or create from existing. And the options here are fairly self-explanatory. We are going to go ahead and select a new rubric because we already had a rubric that I created. But if you, for instance, did not go through the first steps that I mentioned and you really just did this in one sitting, you could simply create your assignment and then create your rubric right then and there. I just recommend that you create your rubrics in advance or later, since it does take a little while, and that's really something that's more of a separate process from creating an assignment. You also have the option to create from existing. So for instance, if you have a rubric that you'd like to use but you want to tweak something, you're going to create from existing, which will adapt that rubric and create a separate rubric based on the one that you selected. But 9 times out of 10, if you've already created a rubric before, we're just going to go ahead and click on the Select Rubric link. And within a few seconds here, what's going to happen, and just as a thing, what I'm actually going to do right now, for those of you that are here on our chat, because on my screen, I apologize, my screen is actually getting a little crazy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop application sharing real quick for a few seconds. I'm going to turn it back on. I apologize for this. I'm just going to stop that. And in just a few seconds here, I'm going to go back here and enable the application sharing again. So if you just, I'm going to go ahead here and start sharing. I'm going to share my desktop. All right. And I apologize for that. So now we're back here. Your screen should load again fairly soon. Again, give it a few seconds in case you don't see it. But again, we are here still in our grading rubric area. So you'll notice that what I've done is, as we were here in this page, we're still in the assignment page. What we've done is I've navigated to an assignment that I wanted to apply my rubric to, and I went in to actually edit the settings for the assignment. And now I'm here down below in the grading section where I see the associated rubrics. I'm going to go to Add Rubric and select a rubric since I've already created one previously. You'll see then that I have, I'm now able to select one of the rubrics that I'd like to choose. And since I already created one, you'll notice I had one at the very bottom. There's a sample rubric. But I wanted to demonstrate that I can just, I'm going to go ahead and actually, for the sake of this particular assignment, I'm going to choose an actual real rubric, something that's a real rubric. I didn't really use a good rubric. So let's say I decide to choose the grading rubric for writing assignments, which is this one over here. I'm going to click on that checkbox. And you need to physically click the checkbox and simply click on the Submit button. And what it'll do now is you should see a little bit of a box that pops up that says click OK to assign the rubric's maximum points as the points possible. But what this really means is if, for instance, you might have assigned an original point value to your assignment, if it's 100 points, for example, but you then created a rubric that was either less than that or more than that, you can, this page will pop up and it will override whatever points possible it was so that it matches what the rubric contains. And it does change because my rubric, I actually had it changed to 10 points. So once we've done that, you'll see here that a rubric is now associated. You'll see the little yellow background here highlighted. There's a grading rubric for the assignments, for the writing assignments. And you'll see a lot of different options here, so let me kind of try to breeze over the most important options. You'll notice that, of course, once you've added a rubric, you can remove them just by clicking on the red circle here, the red X. You can also click on the View Rubric if you wanted to real quickly take a look and see what the rubric would look like. And this is what the actual rubric does look like. I can expand this real quick. You'll then see this is a actual, like as I mentioned, a real rubric. It's a grading rubric for writing assignments, the different levels of achievement, and there's 5 different levels of criteria. And so I say, I like this, so I'm just going to click on that closed window. It's just a preview just to let me know what that rubric is, so I never have to guess. You'll also notice, too, that I can physically edit the rubric here, just in case I notice a typo later on. Here on the type area, you'll notice that for this particular assignment, do I want it to be used for grading or for secondary evaluation? By default, we will always be using this for grading. Use for secondary evaluation is a different option. The use for grading by default is what you'll want to use in case, which is a default, since we'll want to actually assign points. Once we're done grading with the rubric, whatever point values is in the total will be what gets sent to the Grade Center. You'll also see the date last edited in case you made some changes. And the most important thing I wanted to point out is here in the Show Rubric to Students section. This is very important. By default, it is always set to no. I would take my advice. I would recommend that everyone select yes with rubric scores. And what this option allows is when you create your rubric, students are able to actually see the rubric before and after the rubric has already been associated with the assignment. So this is great so that the students, even though they may already know how to complete the assignment, showing them the rubric by clicking this option gives them the actual rubric that you're going to be grading with. So again, it makes the grading process a lot more transparent for them, and they know exactly what's required of them and what the point values are associated with each of these. There's also another option, yes without rubric scores and after grading. Very rarely do many folks that I know use the yes without rubric scores, since you more than likely want students to know exactly what point value they received, since the rubric does send their actual grade to the Grade Center. Or you can also select after grading. So you may not want to show them the rubric unless all the assignments have been graded. But generally, 9 times out of 10, I always select yes with rubric scores. So I'm going to click on that option, and you'll notice then that the Show Rubric to Students gets changed to a green check mark. And so I've already had this rubric associated. I've already made sure that it's used for grading, and I made sure to select the option to click yes without rubric scores. So I'm going to scroll down, and if you, for instance, you wanted to change any other options here in this assignment, since we're here in the edit settings, you could do that, but I just really wanted to come here to associate the rubric, so I'm just going to leave everything alone, and I'm going to scroll down and click on Submit. Okay, and so what then happens now is the rubric has already been associated with that particular student. So what might this look like from the student side, or particularly from a faculty standpoint? Well, let's take a look and see if there is a I'm going to go down here, and there's a couple different ways that you can do this. For instance, I actually have an assignment here. It's a book review. And there's already been a rubric that was associated with this particular assignment. I can verify that by clicking on that drop-down arrow, that action link. Again, clicking Edit. We're going back into the assignment. This is a different one. I'm going to scroll down and just check to see what kind of rubric was associated here. You'll notice that there's 3 different rubrics. And you can definitely use more than one and choose that. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete 2 of them, so I only have 1. So you'll see here that there's already a rubric here that's associated. I'm going to, again, scroll down and click on Submit. If I wanted to see how to actually grade using this rubric, you have a couple of options here. Generally speaking, I usually recommend everyone to go to the Grade Center. Again, under Course Management here on the left-hand side, I'm going to click on the Grade Center. If you have student submissions that have already been that they've already submitted, you can go to Needs Grading to see which ones still need your attention. And there's a couple things here. You'll notice that we have a lot of other assignments, but I'm going to be looking for that assignment that already has that rubric, which is that book review. And it looks like I have Bill Gates and Tiger Woods who had already submitted their work for grading. So I want to show you exactly how I can grade this assessment using the rubric. To do this, I can hover over that item name. For those of you that are familiar with the needs grading, I'm going to hover over the item name, which is the book review. That was the name of the assignment. Click on the action link, And I can choose to grade all the users or grade anonymously. What I'm going to do, though, is I want to grade this particular student, so I'll just click on his name. And when I do that, you'll see here that this is Bill Gates' submission. He has his file that he uploaded. It was a Microsoft Word document. And where you add the grade, you'll notice now that in addition to putting in a point value, I have the option to view the rubric. This is where the powerful feature then comes into play. So I'm going to click on the View Rubric, and a pop-up window should open that looks similar to this. Again, I'm going to scroll down, and now I see the rubric, and where we normally saw the rubric before, I now have the point and click opportunity. I can go in and actually point and click which particular value the student receives. So yes, I'll award him 1 point for focus on topic. I'll say that the accuracy of facts and citations, he didn't really do that very well, so I'm going to say no. I'm going to give him a 0 for that. And you'll notice as I point and click, I can also add direct feedback within the cells. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to say, no, he didn't do MLA. In fact, the student did APA, and I'm a mean teacher, and I wanted him to do MLA. So I'll give him 0 points for that, and I'll say for mechanics and organization, he's going to get 1 point. I could go ahead and add some feedback to this, and what will happen is that they'll show up in the students' My Grades. So when they go in to check My Grades, they'll be able to see not only their actual total grade, they'll see their feedback as well as any other comments just by clicking on their actual grade. So if you notice as I scroll down, the actual interactive rubric already automatically totals it for me. So this student receives 3 out of 10 points. I actually didn't, if you notice, I actually have another level of achievement, but I actually wanted to give the student some low grades because I don't like him. But I selected all the levels of achievement here from the middle column. So the student has 3 out of 10 points. And I can also go in and provide some feedback. And many of you might also be wondering too, well, what's the difference if I provided feedback within the rubric versus feedback out here? You'll notice that I'm in my pop-up window containing my rubric, but what about this feedback out here back in this regular area? I always recommend putting your feedback out here because this is what will be shown in the Grade Center. Students will see feedback that is posted here inside the actual rubric, but they actually have to click a couple more steps to see that. So I usually just use the rubric to provide the point and click option to actually click on the criterion, and it would summate all the total number of points, and I'll scroll down and click on Save. And what Blackboard automatically does is provide the raw total, which is I have the student here received 3 out of 10 points. I can verify that again by clicking View Rubric. This screen again pops up. I can go in and verify this, that the student did receive these points. I can add feedback if I wanted to. And I'll go ahead and click Save. And that'll close out that pop-up window back into my regular needs grading area. I can go in and, like I said, I'm going to provide some feedback. I'll say, great job. And I'll scroll down and click on Save and Next as if I was going somewhere else, but actually I'm not. I'm just going to click on Save and Exit. So this will actually provide that grade to that student. So Bill Gates now has actually already received this particular assignment, or he's already been graded using this rubric. Another way you can also do this too, if you don't use a needs grading area, you can also go into the full Grade Center here simply by accessing the link on the left-hand course menu. So I can go to the full Grade Center. Again, if the screen is refreshing for all of you, I apologize. You'll then notice too that I can scroll all the way to whichever assignment has that rubric. It is that sample assessment. So on that column that I'm going to, I can click on that action, like that down arrow, and I can grade attempts. And I'll be able to then also see it's the same area where I can also use the rubric to grade each student. So then some of you then might be wondering, well, what might it look like if I actually went in as a student to see what it looks like from my end, or from a student side? What would a student see when he gets his score back? Well, I can real quickly log out of Blackboard here and show you what that might actually look like. I'm going to go log in as that particular student. And I'm going to go to that. As a student, I'm going into my course. And remember, as a student, students will see their grades in the My Grades section here on the course menu. So that all they have to do is click on My Grades. And they will then take a look at that book review that we just did. You'll see here that in the book review section, they have 3 out of 10 points. This is the feedback I provided. And if they want to go and see the actual rubric that I used to grade, they can click on the View Rubric button. You'll notice it's only available for the assignments that have the rubric associated with it. So all I have to do is click on View Rubric. And as a student, I can see the same rubric that I just graded with as an instructor a few moments ago, except I cannot actually edit the rubric since I'm a student. I can just see which ones I've been graded and what the point value looks like. So hopefully this is a good way for everyone to kind of imagine what it would look like from a student. And after, as a faculty member, you grade them using that rubric. They'll be able to go into My Grades, see any comments, as well as the actual grade, and clicking on that View Rubric. So do we have any questions so far? I know that this is a lot of information, hopefully intuitive, but if anybody has any questions, again, I'm not seeing any comments or any questions here in the chat box. But if anybody has any questions, again, please feel free to let me know. It's already 12:55, so we're very, very short on time. So I wanted to go ahead now and just kind of stop this, and we're going to move back on into our presentation here. Let me go back here into our main session. So basically, if you've taken a look at some of these at the rubrics, some things that you might be wondering now, well, what about some different best practices that you might be wondering in terms of the actual rubric tool? So I've put just a few things here just for you to note. The first thing is really, again, you can create the interactive rubric before, during, or even after creating the assignment. I just usually do it well in advance. I do it afterwards. I might, for instance, create a writing assignment and then realize later, no, I think I actually want to provide a rubric. So later on I can go in and create one and simply apply it to that assignment using the same steps that I've shown you in today's session. So I can add it right there, right when I create the assignment, or I can simply edit the assignment later and associate it then. Again, I've only shown you the interactive rubric with just an assignment submission, which is very commonly used since most faculty members are using that. But remember that you can associate a rubric using the same steps for other activities like tests, blogs, and journals, wikis, and discussion boards. As I mentioned too, we didn't really look at this too in depth, but as I mentioned, once you've created that rubric, you do have the option to export that and import it later into a different course. So it's always a good idea to note that if you want to share your rubric with someone else, you do have that option as well. And again, in all, it is really a time saver because for many of us who are used to dealing with classes where we're submitting assignments electronically, you know that the typical way of grading is really going to each student, downloading their Microsoft Word file, opening it up in Word, providing track changes in the margins, saving it, and uploading it back. And if you imagine doing that for many students at a time, that wastes a lot of time, and in the end you may want to be thinking about different ways of grading. So this particular interactive rubrics tool is one great way to do it. The only downside I would say to using this tool is that if you do use this, students should be reminded that you are not actually going to be providing comments directly inside their document, but you will be using the rubric to provide comments and feedback within each level of criteria. So with that in mind, this really, again, kind of wraps up today's session. I know I've shown you a lot here, but before everyone goes, I also wanted to point out to you some things with our upcoming programs. I'm sure you're all well aware of our faculty development site. We have different programs that are available. I am also going to be delivering another session on February 22nd on the best practices of teaching online. So for those of you who are teaching online or thinking about teaching online, this would be a really good workshop for you to attend. I'll be talking about different aspects and some best practices. I also have a link to Teaching with the Blackboard site too, in case you need tutorials. This is the same area where you can find all of the different tutorials that I've shown you today in the little screenshot. This is just for your information, so just to keep that in mind. And You'll also will be able to find the archives later on just by going to our factdev.niu.edu site and clicking on the archives link. So this particular session that I'm demonstrating today, you will find this there. So please just feel free to go ahead and go there in case you are looking for the session's recording. And again, at the very end, if you have any other questions or comments, please feel free to let me know. What I am going to be pushing to your chat right now is a link to our survey for this particular workshop. I do kindly request that everyone take a moment to click on that link. It's a SurveyMonkey link to the evaluation for this particular workshop. We don't always offer certain workshops such as this one very often, so it's always good to know what we can do and how we can plan to make our online sessions a lot more, improve them. So just to keep in mind then, again, if you do have any other questions, please feel free to contact me using my email, jgeronimo@niu.edu. You can also visit us at factdev.niu.edu for any of the resources that I've shown you today. If you have any particular questions, again, feel free to let me know. The tutorials that are on the Blackboard site are definitely the same information I'm showing you today, so if you ever need to refer to those, please feel free to go there and download the PDF quick guide for our rubrics. So again, it's already at 1 p.m. Does anybody have any questions or anything like this? So you can, if you want to, you can click on the smiley face in the participants panel and click on that, and show me a smiley face that everything's going well and you're good. So we're all happy here, and we're content. Hopefully you've taken a lot out of this session. I know it's a 1 hour session. There's always a lot to show in 1 hour, but hopefully I've been able to give you the resources for this particular tool. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day today, and enjoy the rest of your week. And again, this recording will be available in the archives section. Again, it was my pleasure to introduce you to the Interactive Rubrics tool, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you, guys.